Leaders Debate. Your moderators this evening, Aaron Isfeld and Scott Roberts.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2023 Alberta Provincial Leaders Debate as we count down to Election Day on May 29th. I'm Aaron Isfeld with CTV News.
And I'm Scott Roberts from Global News, and we'll be serving as your moderators tonight, broadcasting on television, radio, and streaming online.
And we've invited the leaders with seats in the legislature to participate here tonight and make their pitch to you, the voters, for their vision for Alberta on some of the key issues.
And here they are right now. From the United Conservative Party, Leader Danielle Smith, and from the Alberta New Democratic Party, Leader Rachel Notley. Welcome to you both.
Also asking questions tonight are members of the Debate Consortium. Lisa Johnson from Post Media, Courtney Theriault from City News, and Judy Aldis from CBC Alberta.
Now, we have three main topics to cover tonight: affordability, healthcare, and the economy, which, according to our polling, are the top issues for Albertans. We also have a fourth wildcard round. In addition, both CTV and Global News have been solicited questions from you, the voters. We've gotten hundreds of submissions and pared them down to two. Aaron and I will put those questions to the leaders.
And there are some rules tonight, and here they are. Both parties have agreed to all of these rules for tonight's debate. Each leader will have 1 minute to make their opening remarks. Over the course of the hour, 10 questions are expected. Each will be directed at a specific leader who then has 45 seconds to respond. The other leader will have time for a rebuttal, followed by free debate.
And there will be an all-important countdown clock that the leaders can see here in studio, with 30 seconds left in their answer, so they know when it is time to wrap up. And as we near the end of the debate, each leader will have time to make their closing remarks to Albertans.
Well, the speaking order tonight was determined by a random draw, and a reminder to Ms. Smith and Ms. Notley not to talk over one another. We want to ensure that the discussion can be heard clearly for our audience at home, and we're not going to hesitate to step in to ensure that that is the case.
All right, it is time to get started. First up tonight, Danielle Smith from the UCP with her opening remarks. Ms. Smith, you have 1 minute.
Good evening. Elections are about making important choices for you and your family. This election, Albertans have a choice between a UCP government that has lowered taxes, balanced the budget, and returned Alberta to its place as the economic powerhouse of Canada. Or we can choose to go backward with the same failed NDP policies that hiked taxes, drove out jobs and investment, and almost bankrupted our province. We can't afford to go back. We need to go forward. If elected, the UCP will continue to make life more affordable by cutting your personal income taxes and extending the fuel tax holiday. We'll crack down on criminals with more officers on the ground and ankle bracelet monitoring of violent offenders out on bail. And we will continue to invest in healthcare and mental health addiction treatment while ensuring no Albertan ever has to pay out of pocket to see a family doctor. Alberta's opportunities are endless, and I know our best days are still ahead. Thank you, and I look forward to the debate.
Ms. Smith, thank you so much. The floor is now yours, Ms. Notley, for your opening remarks.
To begin, I want to thank our firefighters and say that my thoughts are with those Albertans who are out of their homes right now. Tonight, I want to talk about a better future for Alberta, where we fix healthcare, lower household costs, and create jobs. This election is about trust, and it's about leadership. You know you can't trust Danielle Smith, so my offer to you is this. I will work every day to be the premier you deserve, creating jobs and diversifying for the future. I won't raise your taxes. I will cap your bills. I won't fund a war room. I will fund an emergency room. And I won't ever make you pay to see a doctor. I'll protect our healthcare, protect our mountains, and protect your pension. And having learned today that Danielle Smith broke the law, I will also protect our law, and I will never break it. When I say something, I mean it, and that's the difference between Danielle and me.
Ms. Notley, thank you for your opening remarks. Well, affordability, rising interest rates, and inflation have been top of mind. Big issue for a lot of Alberta families struggling to make ends meet.
The first series of questions tonight are based on that issue, and question number 1 goes to Lisa Johnson from Post Media.
Thank you. This first question is for UCP leader Danielle Smith. We've been dealing with an affordability crisis for over a year. We have seen temporary measures put in place, including rebates and affordability payments, which are only applied to some Albertans. What will you do to support all Albertans with the rising cost of living as inflation continues to have a real impact?
One of the first things that we knew we needed to do was address the inflation crisis created, let's be fair, by the Liberal NDP coalition in Ottawa, spending too much money, driving up the cost of everything. And there's only so much we can do here. So we gave $600 affordability payments. We gave a rebate on fuel taxes to offset the federal carbon tax. And we also made sure that we were going to put on electricity rebates so that people paid less on their power bills. What we have to do going forward is more than that. We know we're going to continue to see an increase in the federal carbon tax. That's why we're going to offer an 8% personal income tax rate. It brings us pretty much in alignment with Alberta or with Ontario and British Columbia. It'll give $1,500 per family, and we'll also extend that fuel tax rebate until the end of the year.
Okay, Ms. Smith, thank you. The same question to you, Ms. Notley.
Well, thank you. You know, under the UCP, the fact is that most Albertans' utility bills look more like a mortgage payment. And your insurance costs for your car, well, that looks more like what you save up for your whole summer vacation. Now, those costs were under control when we were in government because we had put caps in place to protect Alberta families. Unfortunately, the UCP chose to remove them, and now costs are spiraling. So we're going to help. We're going to put a cap back on car insurance, not a pretend one like Danielle Smith did a couple months ago, but a real one. And we're going to help families reduce their utilities. And most importantly, we will never, ever, ever make them pay to see a family doctor.
All right, Ms. Notley, thank you. We're going to open it up to the first free debate on this issue tonight, starting with Ms. Smith.
And a UCP government will never, ever make you pay for a family doctor either. What we also won't do is cause an increase in your power bills. Ms. Notley is not taking responsibility for the fact that she created the power bill crisis. At the time, Alberta Party leaders said it was the biggest mistake of the NDP government because of their ideological changes. By phasing out coal early, they added $2 billion to the cost of your power bill. And as a result, we're seeing the consequences of that today. And she's not stopped. She's going she wants to achieve the 2035 net zero target put forward by Justin Trudeau. That'll cost $52 billion and increase your power bill another 40%. We can't afford to do that.
Well, you know, here's the thing. We actually put a cap in place, and we did that so that people's utilities and their electricity wouldn't get out of control. And it got out of control when the UCP removed the cap. But let's talk about something else, though. Let's talk about healthcare costs as they impact affordability. You claim that you won't raise costs. But Danielle, you know, I've known you for at least a decade, perhaps more, and I've watched your career, and you have argued passionately in multiple settings for your belief that you care about passionately, those were your words, making people pay more for their health care. So my question to you is, why are you not running on the thing that you believe? Why are you not being honest with Albertans? Why aren't you making the argument that you think having them pay more is what you want? Because you've said it in video, in papers, in speaking tours, in the legislature for over a decade.
Ms. Smith, we're going to let you jump in here.
I know Ms. Notley likes to show grainy videos of things I said while I was on radio. And the reason she does that is she doesn't want to run on her record. And the reason she doesn't want to run on her record is it was an absolute disaster. She racked up $70 billion in debt, more debt than any premier, actually all premiers combined in Alberta's provincial history. She talked about deception. Did you remember her running on a carbon tax in the last election? I sure didn't. And that increased the cost of everything. We eliminated it, but Justin Trudeau wouldn't let us keep it off. And now Ms. Notley has not stood up to her boss, Jagmeet Singh, in Ottawa, and worked with us to say don't increase that carbon tax any further. And in fact, certainly don't increase it 300%. No one has any credibility talking about affordability as long as they support a carbon tax, which is going to increase the cost of everything.
Ms. Smith, I'm sorry. You talk about grainy videos, but actually we had high definition 18 months ago when those videos of you arguing for people to pay for their health care came out. And you know what? We had high definition when you said you wanted to sell our hospitals across Calgary. And you know what? We had high definition a week ago when your deputy premier said that he thought people should pay to use the emergency room.
We're going to have to leave this right here. We got a lot to get to tonight. We've got to move on.
And our next question comes from Courtney Terrio from City News. Courtney.
Thank you. This question is for NDP leader Rachel Notley. Now, no matter the provider or contract situation, utility costs remain high here in Alberta. Now, I know you both touched on previous policies, but my question is, what can government do to bring down the actual cost of utilities going forward?
Well, that's a very good question. And what we absolutely have to do is find a way to reduce those costs. A lot of Albertans aren't aware that in the pre-election period, the UCP put a cap on what folks are paying for their electricity just for the last 4 months. What they don't know is that, in fact, come June, they're going to have to pay that back. And that's going to cost about half of Alberta families about $200 million. So the first thing that we will do is we will actually have those families' backs, and we won't force them to pay back the cost of Danielle Smith's pre-election attempt at distracting people from what UCP policy has done to their utilities. But then going forward, we have to find a way to keep those costs lower.
All right, Ms. Notley, that's your 45 seconds. A rebuttal to you, Ms. Smith, 45 seconds.
Well, the first thing is that we have to build a power grid based on it being reliable and affordable as opposed to based on ideology. We have a federal government that is propped up by the NDP that has put war on natural gas. Our power grid here is almost 90% natural gas, and yet we have a federal government that wants us to be able to be completely abated on natural gas by 2035. That is the commitment that Ms. Notley has signed on to. She wants to achieve that. That's going to cost $52 billion and increase our power bills 40%. The other thing that's going to happen is they also want us to phase off completely in their new green building strategy, phase completely off natural gas, which one of the presidents of our large companies has said would cost another $75 billion. That is not the way to get affordable energy for Albertans.
Okay. Ms. Notley, you now have the floor for your rebuttal.
Well, thank you very much. Well, let me just say, first of all, that the numbers that Ms. Smith are throwing around are numbers that have been fully discredited. And they've actually been discredited by the people that the UCP hired to come up with the numbers. Almost the day after they came up with those numbers, the firm came out and said, nope, those weren't right. And in fact, the other report that they were relying on was also deeply flawed. What we know is that there is roughly $16 trillion of international investment floating around out there looking to invest in renewable energy. And if we are going to be forward-looking, if we are going to create jobs, if we are going to position our economy for the future, we need to go out there and get that investment. We can't look backwards. We have to plan forwards. That's who Albertans are. Now, when we did the phase out of coal, and we increased renewable energy in Alberta so successfully when we were in government, we controlled utility costs for the sole purpose of making sure consumers didn't pay the cost, and that's exactly what we would do again.
All right, Ms. Smith, shaking your head during much of that. You have the floor.
Well, I know Ms. Notley says she believes in science and she believes in experts, but somehow the expert at the Alberta electric system operator she wants to discredit. But you notice that she didn't disavow the 2035 target for net zero, even though the Saskatchewan NDP did. Saskatchewan NDP voted with Premier Scott Moe saying it is unachievable. If we want to have a realistic plan, a practical plan, we have to fight back against Ottawa. This candidate will not. We have to fight back against Ottawa and make sure that we put a target that's reasonable, realistic, and achievable, and that's carbon neutrality by 2050. That's the policy of our party, and that is the way that we're going to make sure that we maintain reliability, affordability, and that we actually achieve our targets.
We'll get you back in here, Ms. Notley.
Well, you know, Ms. Smith, I know you're keen on fighting. You want to fight with Ottawa. You want to fight with the media. You want to fight, frankly, with your former self. It's actually quite exhausting. Here's what I need Albertans to know. I will always stand up for Alberta. I will always stand up for the interests of Albertans. I did that when I was Premier. I made sure we got a pipeline to Tidewater, the first one in 50 years. I did that standing up against the BC government. I did it standing up with a federal government, and that's my record, and that will also be my blueprint. So, Ms. Smith, I just have to say I disagree with so much of what you had to say there.
One last word to Smith on this topic.
Well, Ms. Notley didn't stand up when Justin Trudeau cancelled Northern Gateway. She didn't stand up when Energy East pulled the plug. She didn't stand up when they brought in a tanker ban off the West Coast for our product, and she didn't stand up when the No More Pipelines bill was passed.
Well,
she will not stand up.
In fact, you know that's not true. You commented on the fact that I made submissions to the Senate. You know that that's what I did on both of those issues.
It was too late, and I must must tell you, where do you think Justin Trudeau got the idea for just transition and for an emissions cap and for a carbon tax? He got it from Ms. Notley when she was Premier. And she's going to continue to implement these same kind of policies, and she's going to walk in lockstep with Justin Trudeau on making sure that they get implemented, and that's only going to harm our economy.
All right, that is all the time we have for this topic, in fact, for this portion of the debates.
And when we come back, we will be talking more about healthcare and the economy. Please stay with us.
Welcome back to the Alberta Provincial Leaders Debate. UCP Leader Danielle Smith and NDP Leader Rachel Notley are here answering questions that matter to you.
The state of healthcare is one of the most pressing issues in our province, highlighted by overrun hospitals over the winter months and the struggle for many Albertans to find a family doctor.
That topic is front and center in this segment of the debate, beginning with a question from CBC's Judy Aldous.
Thank you and good evening. Fixing healthcare isn't just about spending more money, it's about designing a more responsive and effective system. So, beyond dollars spent, what are your creative and transformative approaches to restoring confidence in the system for Albertans? And Ms. Smith, we'll let you have the first crack at that question.
When I first got elected, I was being told that the AHS system was on the brink of collapse. You had unions saying that we needed to go back to mandates and start masking kids in school. And I said, absolutely not. We are not going back to that. If the problem is AHS, then let's fix AHS. So we talked to doctors and nurses and paramedics on the front line. We listened to them and we implemented their ideas. And guess what? It's working. Hospital wait times are down. EMS response times are down. We've effectively ended red alerts for EMS in both of our major cities. Ambulances in rural are staying in rural, and we're reducing surgical wait times. We're going to be able to keep this going. And if we continue at this rate, we will have completely eliminated our surgical backlog by this time next year and be the first province in the country to do so.
And your rebuttal now, Ms. Notley.
Well, I will say Albertans have had enough of driving hundreds of kilometers to get the emergency care, obstetric care, cardiac care, any kind of care that they need. They're tired of looking for doctors. They're tired of 15-hour waits in the emergencies rooms. And they're particularly tired of having the UCP tell them, oh, the problem's fixed. There is no problem. There is a problem. We've put forward a reasonable, practical solution. The answer is to get more Albertans access to a family doctor. By doing that, with our costed plan, we can take the pressure off of our emergency rooms, off of our surgical wait times, off of our ambulances, and we can also make sure that nobody ever, ever, ever has to pay to see a family doctor.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Notley. Once again, let's dive back into the free debate portion where you're free to challenge each other's policies, beginning with Ms. Smith.
You know, I heard of all of the things that Ms. Notley mentioned when I was in politics last time in 2012, and she had 4 years to fix it, and she didn't. She didn't listen to the front line. All she did was continue to build the bureaucracy, and she didn't get to local decision making. She didn't get to local control. We did. We heard from paramedics what they wanted us to do, and it was actually very straightforward. We had to make sure that they had the ability to drop patients off when they arrived on the site so that they can get back out and be there for you when you needed them. And that was a very straightforward idea that came from the front lines. And Ms. Notley had an opportunity to fix healthcare. She didn't. We're beginning on this pathway. We're making great progress, and we need to have another mandate to continue it.
Ms. Notley will get you in on this.
Yes, no. Well, quite honestly, as I said before, Albertans are so frustrated when they're told that there isn't a problem and everything has been fixed. The reality is things have gotten considerably worse over the last 4 years. The UCP cut funding dramatically. They ripped up the deal with the doctors. They told nurses that they needed to be laid off. They threatened to lay off 10,000 frontline healthcare workers, and then COVID hit. So, and the result, unfortunately, is we've got whole cities without access to family doctors. We've got just last week we had 15-hour waits in emergency rooms all across Calgary, and we recently, just this year, half as many doctors are accepting new patients. So there is a problem. It's very real, and selling our hospitals and forcing people to pay for private care is not the solution.
Ms. Smith, you want back in?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Look, we signed a deal with the Alberta Medical Association. Our health minister negotiated that we are going to have 25% of our doctors on an alternative payment system within the next 5 years. And that allows for team practice. It allows for nurse practitioners and LPNs, psychologists and other health practitioners to work together in a team practice so that more access will be given on primary care. We put $2 billion towards this, and we're making great progress. We have more health professionals today than we did when Ms. Notley left office. 8,500 more, in fact, including 700 more doctors. And in April, our plan to recognize credentials is working. We had 1,400 nurses who are now licensed and able to practice in Alberta, more than any time in the previous 3 years. The system is working. We've got much more work to do. We know that, but we've got to continue on the work that we have, because I've got the courage. I've got the courage to talk to the front line, and I've got the courage to be able to implement some of the suggestions that they make. Ms. Notley has demonstrated.
We're just going to leave it at that question because we have another one on health right now.
You bet. Our next question is from Lisa Johnson from Post Media.
There is already a lot of private delivery in our public healthcare system, which has existed under the NDP and UCP governments. What criteria would you apply to determine when expanded private delivery is appropriate? And we'll go to Ms. Notley first, please.
Well, honestly, I mean, at this point, what we would always look at is to get the best care for the greatest number of people in the most efficient and cost-effective way. Now, as you may know, there was a study that came out today, just today, on the success of the Alberta government's surgical care initiative. And what they concluded was that the number of surgeries went down and the cost went up. Now, that's not entirely surprising, because most often when you engage in experimentation with privatization, that's what happens. It's the same thing that's going on with the lab situation in Calgary right now. With the UCP's intention to increase private lab services, we now see Calgarians waiting up to a month to get a simple blood test. It doesn't work. We need to focus on public health care.
All right, Ms. Notley, that is your 45 seconds. Ms. Smith, over to you.
We need to have publicly funded health care for both doctors and doctor-run surgical centres. We have 300,000 surgeries being done per year. 60,000 of them are in doctor-run surgical centres that Ms. Notley apparently wants to shut down. She hasn't answered the question about how we would be able to replace those surgeries. And I can tell you what is actually happening, because a lot has changed since November when we started making these changes in health care. What has happened, in fact, is that we identified that there were 39,000 people waiting longer than medically recommended. We've been cutting that list down by 3,000 surgeries per month. We're now down to 30,000 people waiting. And as I said, if we continue at this pace, those waits will be completely over by this time next year. And I think that's something to celebrate and continue.
Okay, let's open up the floor now to some free debate. Let's start with you, Ms. Notley.
Well, thank you. I mean, again, I think that we need to understand that there is a very, very serious problem, and we are not a year away from fixing all these problems. Ms. Smith, unfortunately, is playing a bit with the statistics. Last November, we had a COVID wave and a flu wave, and she's now comparing statistics to that period of time. It's a seasonal change that she's trying to convince is turning into a long-term trend, but it's not real. What is real is that this year, or this spring, BC, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba filled all of their residency spots for family doctors. Alberta, for the first time, had 45 vacancies. And then they offered them up again, and there were still vacancies. And we don't have family doctors coming to work here in Alberta. And the reason is because Ms. Smith is doing things like referring to them as tyrants and suggesting that people who follow public health orders are Nazi sympathizers. And these things undermine the ability to attract frontline healthcare professionals. They don't feel respected, and they don't feel that this government is at all focused on science and having their back.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Our doctors, nurses, paramedics, and other health professionals are the heroes of our healthcare system. Everybody knows that. What I find so interesting is that Ms. Notley isn't running at all on her record from when she was Premier, because she would have to admit that surgical wait times actually went up for 9 key surgeries. She'd have to admit that she didn't actually have the courage to take on the challenge of reforming healthcare. We're already making progress. Of course, there's much more to do, but I am confident that with a new mandate, we'll be able to continue making this progress. The next step, of course, is building out our primary care system, building out continuing care, and adding more home care so that people can age in place, and making sure that we've got that team practice so that anybody has access to healthcare when they need it.
Ms. Notley, care to respond?
Yes, well, I mean, I think the fundamental problem here is that Albertans are deeply concerned at the notion of a Danielle Smith-led government reforming healthcare in any way, shape, or form. She claims she's guaranteed that nobody will ever pay for a doctor, but, you know, Ms. Smith, I was with you in the legislature in 2014. You stood up and you guaranteed you would never cross the floor. 3 weeks later, you crossed the floor. Your understanding of the word guarantee is very different than that of most Albertans. And most people are deeply, deeply troubled at the prospect of you reforming healthcare based on your 15-year record of advocating to make people pay out of pocket.
Okay, we are there out of time for this one issue, but we're going to move on. And economy, definitely something that many Albertans are concerned about as we head forward, given the historic reliance on the oil and gas sector for jobs and government revenue, the world beginning to shift away from petroleum products.
Economy and jobs are the key issue in this portion of the debate. With the first question, here is Courtney Theriault from City News.
Now, both of you have made many promises in this election, committing to billions in new spending. With the price of oil sitting below budget projections at various times this year, and given that volatility, how will you pay for these commitments and stay on budget without steep cuts? That first question going to Ms. Smith.
Well, I must say, I know Aaron in the intro talked about shifting away from petroleum products, and I would say that that is the Notley view of the world. That is certainly not my government's view of the world. We believe that we are going to reduce emissions, not that we are going to reduce oil and natural gas. We know that with all of the exciting things that are happening with carbon capture, utilization and storage and all the green technology, we can continue to have a robust, vibrant oil and natural gas sector for years to come. What we want to do is make sure that we're finding more opportunities for our products, having bitumen be used more for asphalt so it reduces the amount of emissions, having LNG export, which creates a brand new stream of income for us. We know that as long as we keep our energy industry strong, we're going to keep Alberta's economy strong. Ms. Notley won't do that. I will.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Ms. Notley, your rebuttal.
Well, you know, there was actually some elements of what Ms. Smith said that I actually agree with. You know, I want to create jobs producing energy. I want to create jobs upgrading our energy, and I want to create jobs reducing emissions. And reducing emissions is absolutely the focus. It's not about reducing or production, it is about emissions. The difference is that Ms. Smith and her caucus have spent much of their career pitting emissions reduction efforts against economic growth. And when we do that, we fail on both. What we want to do is understand the economic opportunity that comes from investing in emissions reductions, attracting investment from other parts of the world, and growing jobs while ensuring greater markets for our oil and gas.
All right, thank you, Ms. Notley. Let's go back to our free debate format right now on this economic question. Ms. Smith, to you.
Ms. Notley has so many anti-oil and gas candidates, I have lost count, including one who compared it to slavery. And I know he hasn't apologized yet, nor have you, or condemned his comments. What I would say is that when you take a position of increasing business taxes, you're creating a lot of uncertainty in our sector. We took the 12% tax that Ms. Notley had imposed, brought it down to 8%, and look what happened. Year over year, we ended up diversifying our economy, attracting more investment, creating more jobs. More people are coming into this province than ever before, and what a bonus. We now have more corporate income revenue than we have in our history, $6.4 billion. When you reduce taxes, you end up attracting jobs and investment and people. When you increase taxes, you chase it away. She wants to increase taxes again. We can't let her do that.
Ms. Notley.
Well, 2 points there. First of all, I find it deeply ironic that Ms. Smith is talking about uncertainty and its impact on attracting investment. This is a person who, well, started by bringing in the Sovereignty Act, an act that her former finance minister very clearly said was going to chase away investment because it undermined the rule of law. That, of course, was before she was found today to have broken the law in an effort to support the private interests of someone accused of wanting to promote violence against the police. All of that chases away investment because it is such a profound compromise to the rule of law. But also, let me talk for just a moment about the issue of corporate taxes. Here's what we're going to do. We are going to take the lowest corporate taxes in the country and move them to be the lowest corporate taxes in the country. Lower than Scott Moe's, lower than Doug Ford's. And at the same time, we will have the income necessary to rebuild our education, rebuild our post-secondary, and invest appropriately in a stable system of healthcare. And all of that creates and attracts investment.
Back to Ms. Smith.
Ms. Notley, it's you and the CBC who need to apologize for Albertans. You flat out lied for several months saying that I and my office had contact Crown prosecutors. She said that is absolutely not true. And she also confirmed that I did not direct or interfere in any COVID-related cases. I would say that we have increased the amount of investment that has happened in our province. We have a $760 million renewable diesel project announced by Imperial. We have $600 million that came in from McCain's. Our Pathways Oil Sands Group is investing. We have an increase in the amount of drilling rigs. That is not a sign that people have lost confidence in our economy. You know what it is a sign of? That when you stand up to Ottawa and you tell the industry that you're going to stand up for them, they actually increase their amount of confidence and they increase their investment.
Except that we have fewer corporate headquarters in Calgary, in Alberta now than we did before in 2019, before you announced your incredibly spendthrift corporate handout.
All right, that's going to do it for this question. We have another economic question coming right now.
And that's coming from Judy Aldis of CBC.
Thank you. You've both mentioned the desire to reduce emissions. Both of your parties have signaled the desire, in fact, to move towards a net zero future. So, Ms. Notley, we'll start with you. Can you outline for us specific actions that you will take to make sure that that happens?
Well, that's a very good question. So let me first point out, in contrast to what Ms. Smith had said previously, is that I was actually the first political leader in Alberta over a year ago to speak out on behalf of Albertans and point out that the draft emissions targets coming from the federal government were unrealistic. I do, however, believe that we need to come up with a Made in Alberta plan that includes practical, achievable emissions limits, and then we need to find and incent the investment. We have to compete with the U.S. and the Inflation Reduction Act to get that investment, but there's a lot out there, and we have some of that set out in our platform, but there's more to do.
Okay, Ms. Smith, you're up next.
Actually, what Ms. Notley has said is that she believes we need an emissions cap and that it needs to be very close to what the federal government is proposing. The federal government is proposing a 42% emissions cap reduction by 2030, which we know is a de facto production cap. And if we have a production cap, it means that we're going to reduce the overall amount of revenues. She has also confirmed, and not denied it this evening, that she agrees with the federal proposal for a net zero power grid by 2035, which we know will cost $52 billion and increase your electricity bills by 40%. We have seen this newsreel before. It's why she doesn't want to talk about her record. When she came in, increased the corporate tax, brought through a surprise carbon tax, increased personal income taxes, 183,000 jobs were lost in the first couple of years.
Well, let me just say, first of all, when we talk about my record in oil and gas, I think it's kind of hard to forget the big thing, which is the first pipeline to Tidewater in 50 years. That's my record. So that's the first thing. Secondly, your numbers around job losses. I think we need to kind of talk a little bit about that, Danielle. Many experts have reviewed that, and they've said they're absolutely ridiculous. In fact, at the end of our term, we had, after a very difficult recession, we came out about 45,000 jobs ahead. And if we were to use your means of coming up with that 180,000 number, the number of jobs lost under the UCP would be over 250,000. So I think Albertans really deserve leadership that will not try to mislead them, but will actually have conversations based on applicable and relevant facts.
Ms. Smith, back to you.
Sure, I'm happy to use the same measure because if you look at our measure, we have increased our net jobs 136,000 since the UCP got elected. So that's, by my count, I guess, 3 times what Ms. Notley was able to do. And there's a reason for that, is because investor confidence has returned. People know that if you elect a UCP government, you're going to get lower corporate taxes. We're not going to come through with surprise taxes. In fact, we're going to have a tax hike guarantee so that if there is ever a proposal for an increase in carbon tax or personal taxes or sales taxes, it has to be put to the people, because these kinds of policies end up chasing away investment, and it costs average taxpayers and it costs average citizens the most. Ms. Notley won't agree to that, and it's the reason for that is she wants to increase corporate taxes, which are going to, once again, chase out investment just like it did last time.
Don't want to cut you off, but I want to get Ms. Notley in here.
When the UCP announced their multi-billion-dollar corporate handout to corporations, here's what happened. We lost 50,000 jobs, we doubled the deficit, and the economy slowed down. 4 years later, we have fewer corporate headquarters than we started out with. So the fact of the matter is we have lower we will still, under our plan, have lower corporate taxes than Scott Moe, than Doug Ford. But what we'll also have is the money to invest in our education system, something that's been horrifically starved under the UCP, restore funding to our post-secondary, a critical partner in economic growth
Ms.
and
Notley,
diversification.
we're going to have to end this portion of the debate.
All right, up next, our viewer and wildcard questions. We're going to shift gears a little bit. You're watching the Alberta Provincial Leaders Debate. Back in just 2 minutes. Once again, welcome back to the Alberta Provincial Leaders Debate. So far, we have heard questions on affordability, healthcare, and the economy.
And now it is time to tackle a pair of questions from our audience that we gathered ahead of time.
This question looks at education in Alberta, and this was submitted from Ray Laser from Calgary. Ray wants to know, how specifically is your party going to address the increased enrollment, teacher burnout, increased class sizes, and complexity in Alberta school classrooms? Ms. Smith, we're going to begin with you.
We have had so much disruption in our education system in the last 3 years. One of the first things I wanted to do is restore stability to the learning environment for our kids. We know one of the most difficult things that our young people are facing is social anxiety and mental health. And so that's part of the reason why we now spend more money than we ever have in our history on education. We have invested in complexity funding for classrooms so that school boards can decide what the best use of that is, whether hiring more teachers or having education assistants or other psychologists. And we're going to make sure that we continue to build more schools. We've built or modernized 106 new schools, and we're going to keep on doing that. Under the Notley government, they only built 47 schools.
Okay, Ms. Notley.
So much of that's not true, but let me start with this. I have watched for 4 years with great alarm what the UCP has been doing to our school system. I imagine a 6-year-old child in grade 1 in a class that unfortunately has 28, 29, 31, 32 children in it, and she puts her hand up to get help, and she waits for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and nobody comes. So she puts it down, and it happens a few more times, and she stops trying. Over the last 4 years, we've had 35,000 net new children enter our schools, and the UCP have not hired a single new teacher. In fact, they fired some, and they also fired about 10,000 educational assistants by tweet. We have a plan to fix this, and I look forward to talking more about it.
All right, Ms. Notley, that is your 45 seconds. Let's go to free debate now. Ms. Smith.
Well, I think that what people might be forgetting is we did have a lot of disruption over the last few years, and that's part of the reason we need to have stability back in our system. I don't think teachers forget, though, that under Ms. Notley, they got no wage increases, 0% year after year. Under a UCP government, we gave them a much-deserved 3.75% wage increase. And I think that that's what we're hearing from the front line. They want to be respected, they want to be supported with educational assistance, and they also want to have a little bit of stability so that they have time to deal with the very severe mental health crisis of our kids.
Heads. Jump in there, please.
Yeah, there have been profound funding cuts to our education system under the UCP. We now have the most crowded classrooms in the country. That was not the case when we left office, but it is the case now. They, as I said, fired 10,000 educational assistants by tweet on a weekend. They also, in order to cut their budget, they did it on the backs of vulnerable children with disabilities ages 3 to 6 by cutting hundreds of millions of dollars from PUF funding. What that meant is that kids all across our province are falling through the cracks. I've been to schools where teachers and EAs are crying about what they can't get a handle on. So the stress wasn't COVID. The stress is this government. We have a plan to hire 4,000 teachers to try to catch up over the next 4 years, 3,000 more EAs, and to restore PUF funding.
All right, let's get Smith back in there.
Well, I would say that Ms. Notley had the opportunity to address class size, and indeed she put forward a proposal to do exactly that, a proposal that the Auditor General said was so badly implemented they couldn't actually track whether it was successful or not, and didn't actually know where the funding went. We know that the very best people to make the decision about what ought to happen in the classroom are our locally elected school trustees. That's why we're giving more funding for mental health, more funding for complexity, more funding for transportation, making sure that every school district has the funding it needs to make its own decisions about what the best mix in the classroom is so that they can meet the local needs.
All right, that is our time for that. Unfortunately, we have to get to our next viewer question, and here it is.
And this question comes from Alex Hamilton from Edmonton. Alex says, please tell us one specific policy your opponent has put forward that you agree with and why. Ms. Notley.
Well, that's a really good question. And I will say this, and I've said it before, it's actually two. I'm going to go with two. So, very early on in the UCP mandate, it was under the former Premier Jason Kenney, they introduced the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation as a means to expand Indigenous participation in our economy. We like it. We're going to expand it, and we're going to expand the number of opportunities that would qualify for that kind of support with Indigenous communities across the province. Another one was they expanded funding of the film and TV tax credit, and that was a good idea. It's brought more excitement into our industry. We will absolutely maintain that, and we look forward to it.
All right, thanks very much, Ms. Notley. Ms. Smith, once again, specific policies that you agree with for the NDP.
I'm very proud of both of the initiatives that Ms. Notley mentioned. The Indigenous Opportunities Corporation has been so successful, I think, in addressing true economic reconciliation. And the film and TV tax credit brought The Last of Us here, which I think all of us feel pretty excited when we watch that on the big screen. What I think Ms. Notley and I would agree with is that we know that there are a number of doctors who are now wanting to specialize, and I completely understand. A lot of time goes into becoming a doctor, and so we're seeing fewer doctors go into family medicine. And so I think we would both agree that we need to move towards team practice, that we need to make sure that we've got team practices for family doctors to work with nurse practitioners, LPNs, and other health professionals to ensure everybody gets the health care they need without having to pay for it.
Okay, thank you both. It doesn't really lend itself to much free debate, that question, but we're glad that we got that one in that because we really like that one. So let's head to our next question.
And this is a wild card question on a theme that's outside of our main topics.
Here's Lisa Johnson from Post Media.
Thank you. This election may be decided by who Albertans trust more. Ms. Notley, based on the NDP's fiscal record in government, there are some people who don't trust you to manage Alberta's finances. And Ms. Smith, you were found today to have broken conflict of interest rules. Why should Albertans trust you? Ms. Smith, this question goes to you first.
Well, first, what I would say is that when Ms. Notley campaigned last time around, she didn't tell anybody she was going to increase the carbon tax. She brought in a business tax, and she also ended up running up more debt than we've seen of any premier in our province's history. And the results speak for themselves. We saw 183,000 jobs lost in the first couple of years. We had a number of people moving out. We had 13 quarters of people leaving this province. In fact, the energy minister at the time said, well, if you can't find a job in Alberta, go work in BC for a while. That kind of defeatist attitude is not what Alberta is all about. Alberta is back on track. We have more people coming in here than ever before. Our Alberta is Calling campaign is working. We've got more diversification and business investment. We've got to keep that going.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Ms. Notley, the floor is yours.
First of all, let me say, I guess there's two things. First of all, I was very pleased to roll out a pretty well thought out costing document for our platform. And that document ensures that over 3 years, we would maintain a cumulative surplus of $3.6 billion. That is in contrast to what the UCP hurriedly rushed out today, which would actually very possibly go into deficit in the third year and is considerably smaller surplus than what we're proposing. And so that calls into question many of the items that they're proposing to Albertans. The other thing I would say, I've been in office since 2008. I have never actually breached the conflict of interest legislation. Ms. Smith cannot say the same.
Well, I guess you did have an MLA who hacked our healthcare system. I can tell you.
Do you
that
really want to talk about our candidates and our MLAs?
Well,
seriously, I do not think you're going to win that one. That is not one you want to do.
I have to tell you, when putting together our affordability payments, to have to ask whether it was going to be hack-proof from the NDP, that's not something that Ms. Notley should be very proud of. What I will also say is that when she came out with her costing document, it was was almost immediately discredited because Todd Hirsch said he hadn't done the analysis on what kind of impact it would have on chasing away investment. Others did. Trevor Toome did. Jack Mintz did. There are several business reporters who did. The Alberta Chamber of Commerce did. And what they have said is that would create instability. And the instability would chase additional investment out. It would chase jobs out. And we would go back and have a rerun of what we did in the period of time that Ms. Notley doesn't want to talk about, which was when she was Premier.
All right, Ms. Notley obviously has thoughts on this. Back to you.
I do, yes. I mean, obviously, the fact of the matter is that many of those people backpedaled on some of that. The credit union has actually said there's not a problem with the increase of the corporate income tax to being the lowest corporate income tax in the country. And indeed, it seems to work okay in Ontario, because heaven knows they are attracting far more venture capital and business than we are in Alberta under the UCP. But I do want to go back to this issue of the conflict of interest legislation. This is a fundamentally important issue. Ms. Smith, you were found to have broken the law in order to interfere with the system of justice to assist with somebody who had been charged with attempting to get people to commit violence against police officers.
We're going to let you
so
get a word in
talk
here,
about
Ms. Smith.
instability. That does not engender trust. That, more than that,
Ms.
it
Smith, please
engenders
go ahead.
fear on the part of Albertans.
Ms. Notley, the NDP, and the CBC lied for months, saying that I was calling Crown prosecutors and my staff were calling Crown prosecutors, and it wasn't true. And that is what the Ethics Commissioner found. Look, I'm a non-lawyer, and I know that I need to be able to talk to my Justice Minister. I'm looking forward to advice on how to be able to do that more constructively in the future. I think that's important for us to be able to get those kind of rules set out. But I will say, we continue to have this issue. I am running on my record. Ms. Notley is running away from hers, and there is a reason for that. The Global Petroleum Survey is one of the surveys that looks at what our business environment looks like. When she got elected in 2015, we were number 3 in the world. By 2018, we were number 43 in the world. This is the reason she doesn't want to talk about her record.
Forgive us. We are running out of time. We're almost at the end of the debate, so we do have to move on.
We do. We have one final wild card question, and here is CityTV's Courtney Theriault.
Well, thanks again. Both parties have insisted they would increase the number of police officers in major centres. But on the surface, that would only allow them to better respond to crimes as they're committed. So in terms of creating safer communities, beyond boots on the ground, what distinguishes your approach from your opponents? And we'll go to Ms. Notley first.
Well, that's a really very good question. So, I was pleased to see that Ms. Smith made the announcement to restore the funding to police officers that the UCP cut at the beginning of their term by hiring the extra 150 officers. We matched that. And then we also went further and said we would also hire 150 more social workers, mental health therapists, those kinds of folks. We would, to help with social disorder on our streets, because we know that's worrisome to people, very worrisome. We also, however, have committed to restoring funding for affordable housing. Under the UCP, we've lost 8,000 affordable housing units, and a further 4,000 people were cut off of shelter allowances. And that level of homelessness has created a real crisis, contributing to the concerns around community safety.
All right, Ms. Smith, your time.
Well, first off, we wouldn't defund the police. Again, Ms. Notley has so many defund the police candidates on her platform, on her candidate roster. I've lost count of them as well. The frontline services are demoralized, and we are giving courage and confidence back to our frontline officers. We've embedded sheriffs in both Calgary and Edmonton. We're adding 100 police officers in both Calgary and Edmonton because we believe that people have a right to take public transit and feel safe. They have a right to go downtown and be able to have a nice dinner or see a game and not worry that they're going to be randomly attacked. And they certainly have a right to walk past an open doorway without having to inhale secondhand crystal meth smoke. We have an approach that is going to make sure that we crack down on public safety and crime and make sure that people feel safe again.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Smith. We've got about 90 seconds for this free debate. Ms. Notley.
Well, I need to start by saying when it comes to defunding the police, the UCP actually defunded the police. The money that they used to hire the 150 is a restoration of the money they cut in 2019. And that's on top of additional police grants that they cut from municipal governments right when they first got elected. So actual defunding of the police is something that I think they should take a responsibility for.
You know, one thing I'm so proud about with our UCP record is it's what's being known as the Alberta model for a recovery-oriented system of care. Because we know policing is only one side of the story. The other is getting people the help that they need. And my chief of staff is one of the foremost experts on the recovery-oriented system of care. We got rid of the $40 per day user fee that Ms. Notley charged. We've added 10,000 treatment beds. We're building recovery communities, some in conjunction with First Nations partners. And we are going to make sure that every single person who wants addiction treatment has access to a treatment bed.
Quickly,
those two things have to go together.
Quickly, Ms. Notley, you've got 20 seconds to rebut.
Well, listen, I think more recovery beds is a great thing. Absolutely. And I actually agree with the fact that the accommodation charge associated with those beds that's been in place for 2 decades is now gone. That's great news. But there's more to it. There's more about wraparound services, transitional housing, those kinds of supports, and those remain unfunded right now.
Okay, thank you. Some spirited debate.
Absolutely.
Love it. I love it. Okay. We are now going to head to our closing remarks. Each leader will have 90 seconds.
And this is one final chance for those leaders to make their pitch to Albertans. We start with Danielle Smith.
I first want to say how much of an honor it's been to be your premier for these last 7 months. I've been overwhelmed by the generosity and kindness of Albertans that I meet every single day. These last 3 years have been difficult for all of us. And now the wildfires are testing our resolve as a people once more. But I know that together we will overcome every challenge we face, whether it's a pandemic, a flood, fire, or economic headwinds. We will take care of one another, and we will move our province forward to a better future. My commitment to each of you, if re-elected, is to serve you with everything I have and to the best of my ability, however imperfect that may be at times. I will continue to focus on growing and diversifying our amazing economy, making life more affordable and our communities safer, and improving healthcare for all Albertans. And I will carefully listen to you and my UCP caucus, because whatever I may have said or thought in the past while I was on talk radio, Albertans are my bosses now, and my oath is to serve you and no one else. I love this province and everything it stands for. We are a land of entrepreneurs and innovators, of pioneers and farmers, of families and communities, a place where the best and brightest come from every corner of the world to join us in building one of the greatest places on earth to live and work and raise a family. From the bottom of my heart, thank you and good night.
Okay, 90 seconds over to you, Ms. Notley.
Well, thank you so much. Tonight, ask yourself, who do you trust to build a better future? Who will focus on the things that actually matter to you? Now, Ms. Smith has spent her entire career campaigning for Albertans to pay out of pocket for basic health care. She's also campaigned to pull Alberta out of the Canada Pension Plan, something that would create huge instability in your retirement. Today, she was found to have broken the law by interfering with our justice system. This is just not how our province should be run. Every day is a new drama. You just don't need to put up with this. Enough is enough. So my offer to you is stable, predictable, thoughtful leadership that you can count on. It's time to get back to the things that matter to people. I will make life more affordable, capping car insurance and lowering your utilities. I will support our entrepreneurial spirit by cutting to zero small business taxes and creating more jobs. And because I'm passionate about making sure your family has health care that you always need without paying for it, I have a balanced, costed plan to make sure you get a family doctor. So that is a better future for Alberta. Now, you may not always agree with me, and I may not have always gotten it right, but I say what I mean, and I mean what I say. If I am Premier again, I will work daily to earn your trust and to focus on your priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Notley. Unfortunately, we are out of time. That does wrap up the 2023 Alberta Provincial Leaders Debate. Our thanks once again to NDP Leader Rachel Notley and UCP Leader Danielle Smith for taking part tonight.
Also, a big thank you to our panelists for participating. And here's this, a reminder, Election Day is just 11 days away. May 29th, it is your chance to exercise your democratic right to vote.